190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
The same working class that is now rising up and being repressed heavily, not only by the military, this police force that Maduro boasted about, but also by paramilitary death squads, you know.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller, and this is the Struggle Video News. We've been on weekly since 2003. On today's program, a rally in New Haven for Palestine, then a short mention of some of the Israeli horrors in Gaza, and finally the last section of my interview with Simon Rodriguez about Venezuela. We begin in New Haven on August 11th.
190,000 dead!
Hey, New Haven, your hands are red!
Hey, New Haven, your hands are red!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead!
190,000 dead! Justice is our demand! Justice is our demand! No peace on stolen land! No peace on stolen land! Justice is our demand! Justice is our demand! No peace on stolen land! No peace on stolen land! There is only one solution! Intifada revolution! There is only one solution!
The people united will never be defeated!
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 Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
All right. One second. All right. Good afternoon, my friends, and thank you for coming out once again. Before I get started, I did want to provide a trigger warning, as my speech will touch briefly on the topic of sexual assault, as I'm sure you're all aware. The last month has given us many a reason to gather and have our voices heard. I'm sure many of you are aware of what has happened over the course of the last month, but for those of you who may have missed it, please allow me to summarize. 2 weeks ago marked 300 days of indiscriminate US-funded genocide in Gaza. This past week marks 10 months of the most televised genocide in history. In the past month, Israel has struck Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, and of course Gaza, in a desperate attempt to draw the West into a regional and perhaps even global war. With these strikes, Israel has assassinated a lead official from the resistance, Ismail Haniyeh, of whom was responsible for a ceasefire negotiation. With these strikes, Ismail al-Ghul, a Gazan reporter, was also martyred, making him the 165th journalist killed since October 7th. For reference, in 20 years of the Vietnam War and 6 years of World War II, 63 and 69 journalists were killed respectively. Allah yarhamhum. May God have mercy on their souls. This past month, 10 Israeli soldiers were found to have gang raped a Palestinian prisoner to the point of hospitalization and paralysis. This sparked debates within the Israeli Knesset whether rape of Palestinians is permissible, and riots by Israeli citizens and government officials alike demanding the release of these 10 citizens, deeming them heroes and holy. the 10 soldiers were released with no repercussions for their crimes. Weeks later, we see leaked CCTV footage from within an Israeli concentration camp of another rape. And once again, the perpetrators go unpunished. Just last week, an Israeli strike targeted a school, martyring over 100 Palestinians, with the majority of them being children. This past month saw war criminal and ICC arrest warrants pending Benjamin Netanyahu receive a standing ovation from our elected officials after parroting the same lies and propaganda that we have heard and disproven time and time again over the last 10 months. This past month, we saw our Bangladeshi students brutalized for their protests, a US-backed fascist coup attempt in Venezuela, and far-right riots in England, all of which sound all too familiar. This past month saw the senseless murder of 2 more Black Americans at the hands of police, being Sonia Massey and Michael Brown right here in Connecticut. And of course, this past month saw Genocide Joseph finally concede and step down, anointing Kamala Harris as the DNC's candidate for the 2024 election. When asked to comment on the aforementioned, Kamala doubled down in her administration's ironclad support for Israel, continuing to use the same dehumanizing language and false accusations of anti-Semitism towards pro-Palestinian protesters. A week afterward, Kamala silenced a group of pro-Palestinian protesters stating, "I'm speaking." When asked of the rape trials, the Biden-Harris administration refused to consider rape of a Palestinian person a war crime, stating, quote, "I am not a legal expert." Now, I am also not a legal expert, but I don't need to be to know injustice when I see it.
That's right!
I don't need to be a legal expert to know genocide when I see it on my phone screen.
That's right!
I don't need to be a legal expert to know that assassinating the man responsible for ceasefire negotiations is no way to ensure a compromise is met.
Yes!
I don't need to be a legal expert to tell you that rape under any circumstance is unacceptable and should never be permissible.
Yes!
I don't need to be a legal expert to tell you that slaughtering journalists and innocent men, women, and children is a violation of human rights.
That's right!
I don't need to be a legal expert to tell you that the U.S. should not be backing a coup attempt against a democratically elected official in any other foreign nation.
Yes!
I do not need to be a legal expert to tell you that the police have taken too many black lives with impunity, and you cannot reform a people who have Nazi tattoos on their forearms.
Yes!
I do not need to be a legal expert to tell you that silencing a group of concerned voters in a swing state containing a large Muslim and Arab population is no way to get their votes.
Yes!
And finally, I do not need to be a legal expert to tell you that Kamala Harris is not the progressive beacon of hope she claims to be.
Yes!
The fascism the American left attempts to scare you with is already here, and it is being ushered in by the people who claim themselves progressive. So when the resistance calls on us to act, what do we do?
Yes!
Louder!
Yes!
And we will continue to act. We will continue to pressure our governments. We will take notes from the Bangladeshi revolutionaries who have freed themselves of their oppressors.
That's right!
We will continue to fight for our martyrs, our prisoners, our neighbors, and for all oppressed people worldwide.
Yes, we will!
Our message to Kamala is clear. We are speaking too,
Yes, we are!
and we will never be silenced.
Oh, we will!
And we will continue to interrupt you until you deliver meaningful actions to put an end to the injustice that you and your administration has created.
That's right!
Because, my friends, so long as there is oppression, there will be resistance. You can assassinate our leaders, you can bomb our homes, you can destroy our land, but you can never silence the spirit of resistance that has arisen within us all.
Never!
Thank you all. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! From the sea to the river!
From the sea to the river!
Palestine will live forever! Palestine will live forever!
Palestine will live
Palestine will live
forever!
forever! So if we don't get no justice, then you don't get no peace! If we don't get no justice, then you don't get no peace! If we don't get no justice, then you don't get no peace! No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace! So what do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! If we don't get it, shut it down! If Gaza doesn't get it, shut it down! If Lebanon doesn't get it, shut it down! If Syria doesn't get it, shut it down! If Iran doesn't get it, shut it down! If Yemen doesn't get it, shut it down! If Bangladesh doesn't get it, shut it down! 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 Shut it down!
We can't talk about the freedom of Palestinians without talking about the millions of innocent Palestinian prisoners, including the over 10,000 that have been arrested since October 7th. Last Saturday, we were called to action by our brothers and sisters in Gaza to demand justice for these hostages. But for as long as we are still seeing the same atrocities on our screens, then every day should be a day that we are taking action. Since 1948, the terrorist state of Israel has detained over 1 million Palestinians. Palestinian men, women, children, and elderly. Palestinians who are given no right to a defense and no right to a trial. Palestinians whose only crime is wanting to exist on their own land. On a daily basis, the IDF barges into the homes and shops of innocent Palestinians, killing and assaulting whoever they want and detaining the rest. Every Palestinian released from Israeli prison has recounted the same stories of mental and physical torture, abuse, humiliation, and assault that they experienced from IDF soldiers. They have been denied food, water, and life-saving medication. They have gone years without trial and without any contact to their families and loved ones. They have been through brutal interrogations where they're repeatedly harassed to the point of permanent mental damage. They have been forced into cages, raped, attacked by dogs, electrocuted, and beaten. A Palestinian detained in November said that they aren't treated like animals because even animals are treated with more dignity. Last week, as touched on by Ahmed before me, Israel unwillingly arrested 9 IDF soldiers for raping a Palestinian hostage so badly that he was paralyzed. While we for decades have protested the wrongful arrests and murder of innocent Palestinians, Israelis are outraged and protesting for the IDF's right to rape Palestinians. They are demanding that Israeli soldiers not be penalized for raping Palestinians, just like they aren't penalized for every other inhumane act and international law that they have broken. Israel has had the benefit of the double standard for too long. And of course, who would hold them accountable when this is exactly how the U.S. has treated people of color in American prisons, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo, and all throughout history? They are trying to break the spirit of the revolution. But they don't know that the resilience of these hostages and martyrs is what empowers us and what labels them as heroes of our history. They don't know that while they are silenced, we will continue to be their voice and the voice of all that are oppressed. Israel and everyone who is silent and complicit must be held accountable. And we will continue to say it, we will continue to protest, we will continue to pressure our lawmakers, we will continue until all of the Palestinian hostages have been freed and reunited with their families, and Palestine is no longer the exception in the eyes of the world. Free Palestine.
During the week, a frightful massacre in Gaza. Apparently, one U.S.-made bomb was the murder weapon. 100 dead with none of the bodies left whole. People were given plastic bags filled with anonymous remains and told to bury them. This is the only picture I found decent enough to show you. The next story is a minute long. It will show a Palestinian man in terrible grief. Consider this a trigger warning. Mohammed Abu Al-Qumsan left his home in Deir al-Bala to register the birth of his 3-day-old twins, Asr and Aysel. He got the certificates, but his joy turned to horror when he found that the Israelis had sent a missile into his apartment, killing the twins, his wife, and her mother. The only Israeli military comment I've seen is the usual BS that the IDF does everything it can to avoid civilian casualties. Evidently, they need more time to dream up a whopping lie.
فكنت انا امزح معها انه انا سميتهم غير الاسامي اللي انت بدك اياهم وكذا، بس انا سميتهم زي ما هي بدها يعني. كنت ارن عليها انه اطمنها انه انا سميتهم زي ما هي حابه انا اسميهم. فدخلت جوا لقيتها مكفنه والاطفال واحد مش مبين له اي اشي، كانوا رافضين يخليني اشوفهم. صممت ان انا بدي اشوفهم يعني اوعيهم لسه ما لبسوهم، والله ما لبسوهم لسه. هيو لسه زي ما هم.
Now, the conclusion of my interview with Venezuelan activist Simon Rodriguez. We start by talking about what people are now using for money. And then we go into the protests in the working class barrios against the supposedly re-elected President Maduro.
The hyperinflation was so harsh that now the common currency in the streets in Venezuela are US dollars. This was not formally established as an economic policy of the government, but the government simply let it run, as it has happened in Zimbabwe and other places where the national currency is worthless and people have to recur to other ways to go about, buying things and having some sort of functional currency.
So we hear in this country that there's been big demonstrations and that it's not middle class or rich people, that it's working people. Is that accurate?
To start, rich people are a very, very small minority in Venezuela because all of this economic destruction, the middle class was impoverished. Many rich people simply left the country and are not living in Venezuela. And also many poor people, even poor people had to leave. Many by foot, going to Colombia, to Ecuador, to Peru, even going by foot as far away as Argentina. So if you had a protest with rich people, you would have a very small amount of people. You could not do anything big.
I understand.
And also geographically, if you see the barrios, the places where people are demonstrating, it's the same barrios that rose up against neoliberalism, against social democratic governments in the 80s, like the Caracazo in 1989, where there was a huge massacre of more than 3,000 people killed by these predecessors, these people who ruled before Chavismo. So it's the same barrios, it's the same zones, it's the same working class that is now rising up and being repressed heavily, not only by the military, this police force that Maduro boasted about, but also by paramilitary death squads. This is also a common occurrence in Latin America, where the government sort of does not do the repression directly, but indirectly through these people, so it cannot be held accountable for its actions. Even though many of them are simply policemen and the military in civilian plainclothes, but they are acting as paramilitary forces. There have been hundreds of people injured, more than 1,000 people detained. The government is boasting that they will be tried for terrorism. The human rights organizations are denouncing that people do not have a right to defense, to have a lawyer. They are presented collectively before judges, not individually, but for example, 50 people, and the judge orders they be tried for terrorism and so on, simply for protesting. So this reminds us of the very, very dark periods of Latin American dictatorships that we have experienced in the past. It's very important for leftists abroad to understand that there is a left in Venezuela. Perhaps they will not agree with what I say. They don't like the positions of Trotskyists, like the Freedom and Socialist Party, but they can look at what the Communist Party, which is from a completely different tradition, what they are saying. They can look at what critical Chavistas are saying. These are people who make a distinction between Chavez and Maduro, and they still support and claim the legacy of Chavez, but they oppose Maduro. Look at what they are saying. And this is all people who did not vote for the right-wing candidate, but who do not accept that because we are in disagreement with this opposition candidate, that then the government can simply make a fraud and stay forever and have $3 wages a month, and have their death squads, keeping people in line. We can't accept this. Nobody would accept this in their own country. So really, it would be important for solidarity to be with the Venezuelan working class, with indigenous people, with women, have a total ban on abortion in Venezuela, who have really no rights, Also, the LGBT community.
Could
want
I
to
stop
give
you for a second?
Yes.
In this so-called socialist Venezuela, there's a total ban on abortion?
Yes. The only way in which legally a woman can have an abortion is an exception that was in place from the 19th century, which is if a doctor considers it's absolutely necessary to save her life. This is the only exemption, but it never depends on the choice of a woman. And if there is incest or rape or any terrible condition, even health conditions which are not life-threatening but can lead to permanent injury, in these cases, this is criminalized, and there have been feminists who have been jailed for providing pills and assessing, for example, teenage victims of rape. So this is the Venezuelan government. And I wanted to add the Attorney General of Venezuela is really what would be in the US, it would be the equivalent of Alex Jones. This is a guy who says that COVID-19 and trans people are the invention of a globalist elite that wants to reduce the world population. And he insists on this definition. He didn't say it once because he was, he has repeated it many times, and he is proud to be leading this so-called campaign against trans people. People have been jailed for being gay. Adult gay people in a party, more than 20 people were rounded up and jailed for offending the public morality in a private reunion. This is happening in Venezuela. So when people talk about the right wing, I think we have to be clear that there are two right wings. There is the right wing in the government that is anti-worker, that is anti-democratic, anti-socialist in deeds more than in words. And you have the other traditional right-wing opposition, and you have a left opposition. So you have to look at the complexity of this and side with the people, side with the rights that you defend in your own country, defend them in Venezuela as well.
Well, thank you very much for this interview. It's been quite enlightening.
Thank you, Stanley.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.